and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Lost Story adventure for Hallows of Time, written by Christopher H. Bidmead and adapted for audio form by the writer. This was originally supposed to be part of the season 23 of Doctor Who before it was put on hiatus, and John Nathan Turner had to basically scrap all of his plans to come up with a new idea for the rest of the series. This story is a very odd one because Christopher H. Bidmead, what he's done is he hadn't adapted it like any of the other Lost Story adventures. It's not a straightforward adaptation. Some things have had to be changed due to copyright reasons, and other things he changed because this story apparently was a very visual storyline, and so to get away with some of the stuff that he couldn't show, he basically broke the story with a new format, as the story actually starts off with the Doctor and Perry going into the TARDIS after the adventure, and they're basically like trying to remember what's happening as they get in some sort of amnesia, and so the majority of the plot talk is in flashback, which we're going to be basically talking about the flashback segments anyway. So yeah, and what I find really frustrating about this story is that it's a very nobody's really heard about this story. You go on YouTube and try and find some reviews of it, you will only find 2 videos related to this product: the Big Finish trailer and a fan-made intro. So that's kind of frustrating. So when I can't really talk about how the majority of people feel about this story. Now this is the Big Finish CD cover, which looks really cool. And like always with these, I print out my own DVD cover. This one I found off the internet, and I will admit it's easily, whoever I got this from, I can't remember their names, but it's easily not their best work. Yeah, it just kind of looks really messy, but it does the job of letting me have this on my shelf. So that's the spine, if anyone's interested. Really cool. It's coming up really dark. Yeah, it's got this Big Finish logo on it, which is kind of frustrating. And then we've got the back. The special features there are not actually on the CD. It's just how the person who made this DVD cover made it. There you go. So, so on to the story. The Doctor and Perry actually land in the 1980s, where the Doctor's trying to meet up an old friend, Reverend Fox, a priest, but he was also a highly intelligent engineer, specifically his work on AI. And according to the Doctor, he actually helped Alan Turing come up with the first computer. So that's really cool. Although, I will admit, why not have Alan Turing? Doctor Who has a strange history with Alan Turing, where they want to talk about him, but they can't for maybe obvious reasons, because I don't know, just stupid. I just think the whole situation is stupid. But anyway, so the Doctor goes to see Reverend Fox in a small village, and whilst he's there seems to be some sort of fancy dress party for Professor Stem, who is this wheelchair-barrowed man who seems to have strange relations with time, as the Doctor's talking to his secretary at one point, or like somebody he works with, and then all of a sudden the Doctor's talking to Stem without him remembering being introduced to anything, and Stem is like, "Doctor, you remember me, we used to work together, we used to help Alan Turing and Reverend Fox, we used to be there," and the Doctor's like, "I remember you now, yes, of course. Strange how I completely forgot about you, that's very odd." So some sort of something to do is wrong with time, but however the doctor's not quite sure yet on what's going on, and believed that that there might be even a natural phenomenon with the mixture of time, and probably has nothing to worry about, as he did promise Perry to take her on a relaxing holiday away from fighting monsters and getting the baddies. So he doesn't actually tell Perry what's going on, and Perry befriends a small boy who has gone in and fancy dressed as a sand monster, sand creature. And he gets upset because nobody believes that he's seen sand creatures. But Perry kind of has befriends him, and the actress who plays Simon the kid does a very good job at making you believe that it's a kid. Although I will admit, maybe it's the character itself, but the character is kind of irritating, because it just seems like he is more of a hindrance on the plot. And so the majority of this story mainly revolves around the Doctor basically getting introduced to a bunch of these people, meeting Reverend Fox, and trying to work out what's going on, as Reverend Fox is getting a lot of money, a lot of funding for a particular project that revolves around time. And he's also made a turtle, a robot turtle, which he can move around. And there's a little reference to K9 where Fox is like, you used to have a robot dog, didn't you? So Reverend Fox is a character that has met the Doctor in his previous incarnation and is well aware that the Doctor can regenerate. So that's a really cool idea. And Colin Baker really nails this this concept of the Doctor having elusive memories just scattered around, and he's trying to kind of put up the pieces, but at this point in the story he's not overly concerned yet. However, when he does get concerned when he sees the boy Simon's mask, as it reminds him of something. Perry takes the mask off the boy, and the boy runs away so she can return it, and she gives it to the Doctor, explaining that it might be something strange going on with time. When the Doctor's like trying to give Perry an example, he looks at the face and he's like, that's strange, where do you get this from? It's like, oh, from a boy, blah 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 blah. And so yeah, that's mainly the plot. And in my opinion, I think this story moves way too slow. For a story that is, I believe it's 100 minutes, it says here a runtime 100 minutes. It should be, I think, it should work out to 245 minutes episodes. But anyway, the story takes a while to get into, and the majority of the plot is just setting up these characters, just getting to hear just things, as the Doctor basically is constantly telling to Reverence that like something's going on, but I'm not quite sure. And I really do like this aspect of the story, but it goes on for way too long. And I must admit, the story itself of the Tractators being on, they find dead Tractators, and the Doctor's worried that Gravis is partly involved, and someone is getting involved, and he gets caught up between the woman who works for Professor Stem and a secretary of STEM, Mr. Steel Sec, who seems to be controlling everything. He seems to know the Doctor and tries to get him out of the way. We hear bits where like he's viewing everybody, and we get scenes in which he's like telling people to try and get him out of the way, out of the scenery. And it's just, I just don't think the plot here is strong enough for an adventure. I feel like the majority of the plot is just the Doctor just wandering around, getting into these situations without being any sort of catalyst to any of the other characters or to the adventure. And so I really did struggle to get into this story. With around the end of part 1, the Doctor basically comes up with the idea to go back to his TARDIS to find out what's wrong with time, and the female character who works for STEM takes Doctor in her car to take her to the TARDIS, despite the Doctor not really telling her anything. And this scene where the Doctor's got to go back to the TARDIS and she drives him there was painfully boring. It is a very painful listen to. Obviously the Doctor understands that she's not herself and she's maybe even mind controlled. So the Doctor just basically waits in his TARDIS, and after a while she comes into the TARDIS and mucks around with the console so that the TARDIS transports with another time machine, and so the TARDIS gets taken by the woman and the Doctor now appears in a car that is a time machine that takes the appearance of a car, and he gets swirled out of space-time, whilst Perry and the boy, now reunited, find some dead tractators. And that's the cliffhanger for part 1. And the cliffhanger is really good. And there's some really good moments in here, but the plot, I find, was incredibly slow. I don't know how to really have a good example of it in this vlogs format, but take my word that, or at least I thought anyway, that this story took a long time to get going. And when part 2 arrives, the Doctor finally gets into the time machine and flies back into the small village in which which is the setting of this adventure. And the Doctor basically discovers that somebody has been using tractators to warp time with gravity, because the tractator's ability is to control gravity. However, Steele basically asks the Doctor to tell him where Gravis is, because if you remember in Frontios, the Doctor and Tegan took Gravis on an uninhabited world, and so these people are going to rescue Gravis. And the Doctor originally, I can't remember, but I think he believes that Gravis is behind this, or someone is going to try and manipulate the Gravis so that they can have a mastery over gravity, to which they've been building a special machine which Reverend Fox has secretly been working on. I mean, he didn't know he was working on this project, but the people who were funding him, Dr. Stem, was trying to focus onto this project and manipulating him to get this project working. And so the Doctor basically first believes that Steele is the one behind all this, as Reverend Fox remembers Professor Stem very well, and so the Doctor doesn't really believe that Stem is behind all this, that he's some sort of evil time traveller. But after the Doctor gets into a small battle with Steele and knocks him out, it is revealed that Stem is actually a robot working for Professor Stem. And so it's revealed that Stem is basically the bad guy who wants to have control over basically matter, over everything. Now, here is where the big difference from the audio drama to the original script came into being. As in the script, we are not too sure who Stem is. He's only referred to as as Professor Stem, and the Doctor kind of gets a feeling that he recognises him, that this kind of plot, this scheme, the way he talks seems sort of familiar. But in here, it's just Stem. In the original script, it was meant to be revealed that Stem was in fact the Master. And what's really cool about this is that if you go on the Big Finish website and you look up Master stories, this story actually comes up on it, basically confirming that it is the Master, but the Doctor's amnesia, which was, like I said, like the framework of this story, the framework of this story means that the Doctor doesn't remember that it's actually the Master. So, in a way, it's still a Master story, but an unofficial one. The reason this was done is, I believe it could have been one or two things. Either A, this was supposed to be the Anthony Ainley Master, who sadly passed away before he could do any Big Finish. But B, which I think is the more likely case, is that they didn't have the rights to use the Master for this particular story. The Big Finish have used the Master in other stories, but I think for this one, I think I've heard somewhere that they didn't get the rights to use the Master, and so Stem stayed Stem. And so the Doctor basically tricks Stem into taking the TARDIS into this circle, and Gravis actually makes a deal with the Doctor. Now what's really strange here is that the Gravis, we never actually hear the Gravis talk. We hear the Doctor dealing with Gravis, as the Doctor describes, he had to talk with the Gravis and he thinks the Gravis will help. But Gravis himself doesn't actually talk, which is a very strange plot into the adventure. And so Professor Stem gets sucked out of the space-time vortex, and the Doctor and Perry are free and save the day. And yeah, and it might have sound like I've only talked about little bits of the plot, but I don't think there was a lot here to talk about. Majority of the plot is the Doctor basically just stating stuff that we already know to continue the runtime, and I found this a very, very dull listen. The idea of the framework of the Doctor and Perry trying to remember back means that we get some scenes which kind of feel like in the original Sharda, where it feels like there were scenes missing, and so we had Tom Baker, or at least in this case, Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant, just basically stating what had happened. But it is a very fun and unique selling point to the story of a story that basically the Doctor and Perry are trying to remember. There's this really strange scene in which Perry finds a time tunnel which leads back into the Doctor's TARDIS after being stolen by the baddies. And the way it's described is that their faces basically appear in the time rotor, the thing in the middle of the TARDIS that goes up and down and stuff. So yeah, you get some really weird visuals, but I think plot-wise, it just didn't do anything for me really. So yeah, this video is probably really short, so I do apologise. So that's the Hollows of Time. Overall, I think it's a very weak entry into the series. I remember not liking it when I first listened to this. This would be my second time listening to it. And I was really hoping that listening and watching to all of these stories back to back, I would get some sort of appreciation of this story. But sadly, that was not to be. Not to say that it's a bad story. I think a select few people, especially if you're a fan of Christopher H. Bidmead's writing style, to which I am, but I'm not such a huge fan that his style would make me want to like this story. But if you're a big fan of his style of writing, I highly do recommend the story. It's got that kind of eerie, something is wrong with the universe feel that goes along with all of his stories, really. But for me, it just didn't click with me. Maybe it was generally a bad, slow, it doesn't say bad, but it's a slow story. Or maybe it just wasn't for me. I don't know. But anyway, that's The Hollows of Time. So join me next time where Perry has to go back home to attend a funeral, whilst the Doctor discovers that there are some evil works with Cybermen. I'll see you next time in The Reaping. Ta-da!